Good, very good. Okay. So, um, let's take about 2 or 3 minutes, just be quiet and gather ourselves. And then I'll sort of give you some background information as to, I think, why this is coming together the way it is. Wow, we got a lot of, there's all kinds of people here. Deb, Gary, is that you? How did you even find this? Um, okay, so I'm going to start and I'm going to give it, as I said, when I started to look at the actual material and what it is that I'm going to be speaking about, there's a lot more of it than I thought because I tend to generally only concentrate on a few incidences and urge other people to sort of like do the research and do the math for themselves because I think that's a very important part of this. So back when I was
There they are.
back when it was time to do the sparkly edition, the
Time
first
is at 3 o'clock. I might have a beer when you have a beer. Thank you.
okay, I'll have one. back
Pass it
when,
around.
back when I was back when I was asked to do the sparkly edition, one of the things that I was asked to do was change the clarification of terms, which is in the back of the book in most editions, and put it at the front of the book and call it the use of terms. And when I read through, it became fairly obvious as to why that was the case. Now, the reason why I was asked to change it from clarification to the use of terms was what Jesus said is the Holy Spirit, clarification is a function of light. And light is the domain of the Holy Spirit. So the clarity actually comes in your listening and asking of the Holy Spirit what this means for you. That's where clarity of the material comes for the individual who is using the material to gain understanding or to fulfill the function that the Course offers us. Now, what Jesus said was, this is how I use terms. I use terms in this particular way. And generally speaking, when I go back and I research a term that I find is being used in a different way than we traditionally understand it, I'll find that Jesus's use of the term is explained in the beginning of the book, the use of terms, or within the first two chapters, which is the first one is the miracle principles. Within the miracle principles, and again, this has been helpful in doing some reading with Kevin and the other group. What I found is that the miracle principles, to me, tend to have a bit more information when in the Sparkly edition than they do in the other editions because things were cut out, things were edited out for various reasons. And I'm not saying they were wrongly edited out. I'm just saying at the time there was a concession made, and this was the way they were going to do it, and this is the way it was proceeded to be done, and was edited and put on the market. Now, when I began to do the Sparkly, it was obvious I was not doing it for money. It would just be to give it away. Our foundation would give them away. I was asked to call it the use of terms and put it at the front of the book. And there's several terms that are incredibly important to the understanding of what Jesus is trying to express, what Jesus wants us to learn. And the traditional use that we have for those terms, based on the way we've learned in the past prior to the course, are not consistent with what Jesus uses them as and for within the course. One of the biggest ones, of course, is forgiveness. Um, Another one is consciousness itself, the word consciousness. There's a difference when he talks about the difference between made and create. He has a different understanding for the use of the word made than he does for the term create. Um, there's a different understanding for the use of the word extension and projection. And he uses them the way he does because he wants to convey his message. He wants his message to be conveyed and understood, which is the big thing. Um, so one of the things this morning I was sitting around and, just thinking about this whole exercise for myself and looking at some of the notes and some of the things I've come to understand. And the phrase that kept on coming back over and over again was something that Jesus used to say back in his day when he would say, "Let he who have ears hear." So what he was saying is, if you can understand this, you do. If you can't understand it. And there's reasons why, but wasn't important to him. What was important to him was conveying his message to the best of his ability, using the words or the vocabulary of a particular time in order to be able to convey his message. And here we are, 2,000 something years later, where he's conveying the same message in terms that we can come to understand. And they're terms that have been used traditionally, like I said, as forgiveness. The first one I want to deal with, and I'm going to get to forgiveness. The first one I want to deal with is the term consciousness. Now, the other thing is this is what I would really like and appreciate. If anybody has any questions, if anybody has anything they'd like to say, if anybody kicks something up for anybody, just really feel free to just raise your hand. And I love this to be a discussion rather than just a lecture about it. So I really enjoy communicating and talking to people about these things. Go ahead. Lisa. Uh-huh. Can't hear you. Unmute.
That better?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to ask, because I can barely hear you.
Okay.
I've got my ear right up to my mic. Can you, anyway, from your end, turn up the volume, honey?
I can try.
Thank you. I can barely hear you.
Can you hear now better? Is that any better?
Maybe a smidge, but that's okay. Thanks. If you see me going like this, it's because I've got my ear to the mic. Okay, thank you for taking my request.
Does anybody else have problems hearing? No? Okay. So as I said, I love it to be a conversation. I love it to be a dialogue. I really appreciate when it kicks up something in your mind and, there's a question that arises or something that you're seeing for yourself that you'd like to express. So one of the terms, again, it was really important to me when he told me to change it from clarification to use of terms. And he explained to me that clarity was a function of light, and light was the domain of the Holy Spirit. And the clarity, the actual understanding, that little burst that we get when all of a sudden we get it, that comes between you and the Holy Spirit. That's the Holy Spirit joining us in communication and us jumping into a certainty and a knowing that we can't have on our own. And that tends to sort of like, you know, when you talk about my thoughts, the thoughts I think are the ones that I think about and give meaning to everything. My thoughts are the thoughts that give meaning to everything. And that's why there's no communication here in a sense, because of the fact that you think your thoughts. And so you have an idea of, let's say, what consciousness is or what forgiveness is. Now, who knows where that came from in you? Who knows how the understanding for that word evolved in you individually? Who knows if it means the exact same thing to your next door neighbor here on the screen? Nobody really knows, and yet we use these terms. We use the term forgiveness, we use the term sin, we use the term the past, we use the term sickness, we use the term made, we use the term create, projection, extension, and they have individual meaning to us as we hear them. But what Jesus wants us to do is learn what he means. And that doesn't require agreeing with him as to what it means. It just requires that we accept how he uses the term and use his use of the term within the reading of the material that he has given us to read. That's why there's certain statements, I don't care if you believe this or not, just read it and listen to what it says. That's it. You don't have to believe it for it to be true. You don't have to believe me for me to be true. Truth is true and nothing else is true. Now, we have meaningful words, forgiveness, consciousness, are just a couple of them. Now, we come to the course with some traditional thought that we understand what these words mean. Now, all of a sudden, we start to read the book and the terms start to come up. And we're going along thinking that we know what he's talking about. When the truth is, the whole lesson of the course is let go of everything you think and come into a new instant so that we can communicate and we can know together. Now, technically speaking, he's asking us to do that with the understanding that we bring to the words that he's using so that we can learn his meaning. But what he does to assure that we can understand him from the beginning is begin to define the terms as he uses them. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to find those in what's at the beginning of the sparkly or the use of terms. And originally, it was the clarification of terms, and it was put at the back of the book. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that you'd have to read a whole book before you could get to the back to find out what the terms mean. However, the sequence that it occurred makes sense when you understand that Helen and Bill received this book, and then Ken Wapnick stepped in and tried to edit it. And through the editing, at the end, he began to understand that he didn't know what the words meant. So he needed clarity. And they asked for that section at the end rather than at the beginning. Now, Jesus has made statements to the effect that this time, there's going to be no mistaking meaning. This time, I got it. I know what I'm doing. And what I find is that there's an evolution that happens because the material is all available. And he's asking me to do something particular to help people understand because he sees how we don't understand. He sees the blocks to our awareness, to understanding the message. He understands the blocks to our awareness, to understanding the message, to our awareness of love, the presence of love. And even the term awareness is used in a different manner. Awareness, based on the way Jesus uses it in the Course, is what we are in reality. Because there's no duality in reality. There's no other in reality. There's only our awareness of the presence of reality and the extending of that by our awareness and joining with our brother. So the top of in a sense, if you were to equate levels of understanding, the level of understanding where reality is total and there's nothing outside of it is the awareness of the presence of love, is the awareness of the presence of what reality is. And that's it. Because there's no other, there's not something to be aware of. It's just the awareness of what we are as we were created with our Creator. And the extension of that in the wondering, in the wonderment that that brings to our mind. So when he uses the term awareness, he's using it in a slightly different way. Now, when he uses the term consciousness, he says consciousness is the domain of the ego. In the lexicon of meaning that Jesus uses, the term consciousness is like a receptacle. Consciousness is just a receptacle where all of our ideas are held. And we have levels of consciousness because we have levels of ideas that start out at the bottom and go up on through the idea of the Holy Spirit. So in our consciousness, we have all these stored up ideas. That's what consciousness is based on how Jesus uses it in A Course in Miracles. I know when we hear that word, though, to many people, because of all the material that's written, because of all the books that are out there, they don't quite use consciousness in the same way. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example. Jimmy was talking the other day. He uses the term consciousness in a way unlike to the Course. But when he strings together what he says, he's trying to say the same thing, but utilizing words with traditional meaning rather than the meaning that the Course has. So if you try to understand the Course through Jimmy, it's not quite the same way. The experience and the action of mind is. But the use of the terms, as Jimmy uses it, are not the same as they are in A Course in Miracles. Now, I'm a stickler because I get direction from Jesus about these things. And I understand that nobody's trying to mislead anyone. They're trying to express it to the best of their ability. However, the expression to the best of their ability becomes a block to the awareness of what Jesus means when we accept it and not apply the principles of the Course to how we're thinking, which is let go of our previous meaning, don't worry about it for a second, let go of it, and learn anew with me what this means. Now, if you don't believe it, you don't like it, it's okay. Jesus isn't concerned about that. Go back to using it and thinking it the way you want to. But if you want to learn this material, if you want to hear as Jesus speaks, if you want to let him who have ears to hear, then it's best to utilize the meanings of the words as Jesus uses them, rather than as we have traditionally used them in the past prior to our exposure with A Course in Miracles. And consciousness is a big one. People talk about, oh, consciousness as this deep, everything. All Jesus is saying is consciousness is just a receptacle. It's a receptacle where all of our ideas are stored. So our mind, which is the chooser, can pick which ones we would like to use in order to best express whatever we're trying to express. Now, in consciousness, the ideas that we use to express the Holy Spirit are really no higher. There's no order. They're just words. There's a higher level of meaning that we give them, but they don't really mean anything but what we give them. Everything has all the meaning we give it for ourselves. So in our consciousness, we have all these ideas. When we want to express about the Holy Spirit, we pick certain ideas. When we want to express about the world, we pick certain ideas. And each one of us has a consciousness where all our ideas are stored up for us to use. Now, if your consciousness is telling you it means one thing and mine is telling me I mean the other thing, we think we're communicating because the word's the same, but there is no communication because we're not understanding together as one. And the entire purpose of A Course in Miracles is the healing of the idea that we're separate. And the way that we heal the idea is in moments of joining. Because when we have a moment of joining and we hear something, it takes on it takes on a totality of difference than we heard when we heard it alone, because it wipes out what we thought of when we were alone. And now we're joined with our brother in a recognition of understanding that goes beyond the words and shows us that we are actually together in this. And what Jesus is attempting to do is give us the best possible shot at understanding what's going on here. And all he's asking us to do is to drop our ideas about what we think these words mean and attend to and utilize his for a moment. And it's amazing that it's taken me all these years to realize that most of the things that he uses in this way is in the use of terms, which he asked me to put at the front of the book. Now, when I go through it, I have this list of things that people have given me. And basically, there's probably 15 to 20 things there. About 18 of them say, oh, this is the definition from use of terms. This is what Jesus says in the use of terms. This is what Jesus says in the use of terms. And then there's more in the miracle principles as they're expressed in the Sparkly, because they're a little bit longer and they contain a little bit more information. Now, I'm not saying that they were wrong to cut this out. I'm saying from the perspective that they were utilizing in the moment when the Course came through, at the time that it came through, this was what they were given to do and how they were given to do it, because nobody really knows what's going on and what the effect is going to be. And the popularity that it's taken on and the number of people around the world that begin to use it, I think it would behoove us all if we actually come to an agreement as to what it says, rather than using it to continually argue and disagree. And what I find is it comes over basic words like forgiveness. Forgiveness is a term that everybody uses in every religion. But forgiveness as Jesus used it has nothing to do with having done something wrong. If we're entirely innocent, then we could not have done anything wrong. But we can perceive a particular way because we think we're guilty. And because our mind is the maker of the illusion that we perceive, we can look outside of ourselves into our perceptions and prove to ourselves that we're guilty and we have no idea why, and continue to find the reason for that guilt. And you're never, ever going to find a reason for that guilt simply because you're truly not guilty. You just think you're guilty based on an experience or a feeling that you're given meaning to. Now, forgiveness, what Jesus says, it's like a door hole. It's another way of perceiving. It starts with a different assumption so that when you utilize it, you'll see things differently. It doesn't prove you did something wrong. It shows you that your mind can be righted, that you can see in a new way that no longer makes you wrong, no longer makes you guilty, but in fact shows you that even here in space and time, our thinking can be utilized along the way, along the same sort of manner that you would think if you knew you were divine and no longer had a human consciousness. So the whole interaction in the Course between the divine mind of Jesus and Helen and Bill is a demonstration of the ability for the human being, exactly as he is, where he is, to begin to communicate with the divine mind and relearn the way we thought as a divine mind so as to help us remember the truth of our divinity. So it all begins to fit together in particular ways. And again, it goes back for me into understanding what Jesus means when he uses particular terms, like forgiveness, like consciousness. You know, there's one, and this one I got a confession to make. This one, it drives me crazy. This is really when I need forgiveness and I need to remember. Jesus uses the term made and he uses the term create. Okay. Creation is only of the eternal. Creation is utilized only to express that which is eternal, that which is infinite. The word made is used always in relationship to things that were made and have a beginning and an end, exist within a temporal framework in a temporal sequence. So man makes things. Man does not create in space and time. It makes things based on what we perceive is our need. Creation is the lack of need and the extension of the eternal for the eternal and by the eternal eternally. So I have these conversations with course students all over. I've been having a long one with people from the foundation. And something was said, and a woman who runs the foundation, she said something to me about, well, that's why Helen and Bill created blah, 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 blah. And I had to say to her, I said, you know, and these are the kind of things, like the stickler for me. You have someone who's telling me the way the course is meant to be used and what it's been used for, and yet they make the simple mistake of not using the word made when they should use the word create, which leads me to believe, well, they have an overall understanding of what they think the course is saying. They're not really looking at the words of Jesus. They're still trying to utilize their own split mind and in a way that is, I'm going to say, non-creative, because it doesn't create anything. It makes up definitions that it already understands so as to avoid the ability to have to join in a moment where they give up their own ideas. So it drives me crazy when people talk about all the things, all the incredible inventions that man has created, when Jesus would never ever use that term for the things that we make, because we still have need here in space and time. And we're making these things in order to fill need. Creation does not do that because it knows not of need. It only knows of what's eternal, what's infinite, and that's what we are as love together. So these are a few of the things that, you know, I particularly find helpful to read for ourselves. And I don't want anybody to take it from me. I want people to, in a sense, it's better when people disagree with me and they go off and find out for themselves what I'm saying. It's better because there's more energy in that. There's more energy in the act. There's more energy in the activity of disagreeing than there is in the activity of acquiescing. Because something grabs a hold of you. And that's why Jesus says, he says some of the things that we consider to be our greatest failures are actually our biggest successes. And some of the moments when we think we've had these incredible successes, we failed. Because space and human beings are upside down in space and time. So when I see somebody gets an attitude toward these things, I know it has juice for them. That's important. There's something behind them pushing them. Their own mind is pushing them. And I think that's good, which is why I think it's important to let people know that these things can all be read. You can read them for yourself. You can read them for yourself. And why, we turned it into the use of terms and put it at the beginning of the book. So, I think I may just leave it there for now. And if anybody has any questions or anything they want to say, please feel free to say it.
Teddy, I found what you were saying very interesting, and thank you. I've been using the word creative as a word to describe some of the good attributes of my granddaughter. And so I'm trying to find another word that would basically show that she's unique, that she has wonderful, possibilities. Can you give me another word to use? Thank you.
Wow. I would say my granddaughter is unique and she has incredible possibilities.
Thank you.
You want to know why I would say that? Because I think every grandmother or grandfather looks at their grandchildren and sees that, because it opens up the wonder in their own mind to their own to the extension. Wow, anything's possible here. That's really you. This is what the course is actually saying. That's really you seeing inside yourself what's going on in you and sharing it with your granddaughter.
Yeah.
And the sharing of that can't be bad.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody?
Yeah, Teddy,
Yes.
I just see an iPad, but that's all right. Thank you for this. I think it's wonderful because it's so important to be clear about the terms and try to understand them as Jesus uses them. And I really appreciate that you've put it at the beginning of the book. Over the last day, I've been reading through the clarification of terms, meaning the use of terms in your sense, and comparing it a little bit with the course's use of it. I like that you have it all in one block. I like it because everything flows from one thing to the other. It's not chopped up in little sections, and that it allows for that meditative going into what the meaning of it and watching what it is as I read it and as I feel. I don't quite know how to put it into words, but as it just, the enlightenment happens in the mind from it. And the other thing I wanted to say was that in comparing the Foundation of Inner Peace edition, in small instances, like when I've read it over the phone with friends, well, I've been following in the CIM edition, which I think is similar to the Sparkly edition. That's my guess. That I prefer often the Sparkly or the CIM edition because there's a greater richness and depth to the terms, that somehow it seems that they've been turned around in a way that sort of narrows the feeling into the material.
Well, that's true, and I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always, there's one thing that I always thank God for about all the editions, is that the lessons are the same no matter which book you pick them up.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is, when you have a particular, let's call it, purpose in mind for editing, you edit according to the purpose that you have in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact when Ken edited the book, he did not have the same purpose in his mind as I did. He was attempting to understand the best that he could and was expressing, the controversial, soul was controversial to Ken, not to Helen or Jesus or Bill.
Mm-hmm.
But what Jesus was saying, like Bill said, hey, if one of these pages disturbs you, but it disturbs the peace between you and your brother, rip it out. And in a sense, Jesus was saying that, okay, I see how this is getting in the way. The most important thing is that we join, come together and fulfill our function.
Mm-hmm.
And this book, getting this book out is our function. Let's just get it done. Don't worry about it. It can't be wrong because what's left in is still true.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right that the flow isn't there. And there's a reason for that. There's no chapter, there's no headings in it because the headings are a constant attempt to define and break it down
Mm-hmm.
in a way that's understandable. And I was asked to do the exact opposite thing and to do it because Bill was originally asked to do the editing and he did it. When Helen and Ken sort of got together, Ken became more prominent in her sort of life than Bill, and Bill had already read all the material and gone through it and was utilizing it. So he was like, hey, it's okay by me. Let you guys do whatever you want to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was altered a little bit. Now, what Jesus has asked me to do is he wanted Bill's edit to be back in print with the word soul put back in. And he asked me to do that for two reasons. Number one is put the term soul back in because they could be roughly considered the same as spirit. So they're not the same. When you read the first couple sections of A Course in Miracles, he talks very directly about what the soul is and what the spirit is and the function each has. And what I get told over and over again is look at things in terms of functional, not personality wise. The Holy Spirit has a particular function. Us as souls that make up the Son of God have a particular function. And God the Father has a particular function. We all have a function within the sonship, within God creating. And it was important for Jesus, for people to know that if he gives you a function and you say yes and fulfill it, then it does get fulfilled. Like listen, learn, and do something. Bill did what he was asked to do. And because of his graciousness and, Helen and Ken's desire to do it in a particular way, it came out in a particular way. But Jesus wants everybody to, if Jesus asks you to do something, if you're in communication with Jesus and he gives you an assignment or he asks you to do something, you say yes, it's going to get done through you, by you, and it's going to be recognized somehow because as above, so below, as within, so without. And there's a need for validation of our right-mindedness and true perception and a validation that when correction comes, it actually works, it actually appears. We see a different world. We see the world differently. And what Jesus wants everyone to realize is if you're given a function and you say yes to your function, the completion of the function is as important to Jesus as it is to the rest of the sonship. And we all have a function that we must fulfill. And each and every one of us will be recognized for the fulfillment and in the fulfillment of our function. And that's also something that Jesus has stressed with me as to why he wanted Bill Thetford's edit to be put out. So
Yeah.
that's,
Well, I feel very grateful for Ken's interpretation. Although when I first started the course, my inner feeling was not to listen to anybody else's interpretation, but to listen to what I was hearing behind it.
Oh, I think it was, it's like people say to me, when are you going to forgive Ken for suing you? But the truth of the matter is Ken was just a player, and we were all just players in a play to get done what Jesus wants to get done. He says, I'm in control of space and time.
Yeah.
Nothing happens here but by my consent. Okay, that's all of it. So something was going on for me and him to be involved together in the situation that we had been in the past, as well as the situation we would be in the future. Something had to be going on for him to have sued me. And based on the way it turned out, I can't be but grateful, because they would have controlled the copyright and there wouldn't be all the material out about this book. I mean, the hubbub, they were trying to control it. Robert Perry's book was Ken was going to sue Perry and Marianne Williamson. They had books ready to come out. And they kept a court case going for 7 years to control the copyright. And finally, the judge said, what's this all about? When the judge saw it, he understood what going on. And he freed the copyright. Now, that couldn't have happened, unless they took the time to sue me. And the cool part was I never did anything that they were suing me for. So I was, in fact, innocent of the charges. Now, that's how that worked out. Only somebody who has an overview can say, okay, I can see how we can make this go faster. I can see how we can get this thing happening here. And the miracle is merely a device that is the only device we have at our control to help us save time. Rod is saying you can't hold the book without feeling it. To me, that explains why so many, this is true, Rod. To me, that explains why so many people keep it unread on their bookshelf until they are ready.
Oh, I just feel very grateful to you, Teddy. And Vicky.
Oh, thank you. So I guess we sort of have to go now. But, I said, I'll be back, or we could do it, I know we're going to have to do this again, because there's some other things I really want to talk about specifically along those lines. Because, and as I said, I don't care if people believe me or not, go find out for yourself. And that's what I'm an advocate of. Find out for yourself. And again, what Jesus says is, listen, just use them the way I'm using them in this book. If you don't like it, throw it out. Go back to whatever you wanted to do. I'm not asking you to take my meaning. I'm asking you at least to use my meaning when you use my words, when you read my words. That's important. Whatever happens after that, But once it's like Rod's saying, once the book's in you, it's in you. It ain't going anyplace. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you, Teddy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Linda.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Linda, for hosting.